Everyone thinks they know what they'd do if someone came pounding at their door in the middle of a blizzard. But I can tell you, until you're standing there with snow howling sideways, your dog bristling, and entitlement staring back at you through the peephole, you don't really know. My name is Kevin Winters, and that night on Black Pine Ridge, I found out what it means to defend your home against someone who doesn't believe the word no exists. It was just after midnight. The storm had rolled in earlier than the forecast. Promised. The kind of mountain blizzard that makes the world vanish in a wall of white. Inside my cabin, everything was calm. The wood stove glowing orange, the smell of pine smoke curling through the air, and my husky Grank twitching in his sleep, probably dreaming of chasing down some unlucky squirrel. For a moment, it felt like the world was frozen in perfect peace. And then the pounding came. Not a knock, not even a shout for help. It was the kind of pounding you hear in emergencies. Urgent, demanding, heavy enough to rattle the door on its hinges. Grank snapped awake in an instant, a low growl starting deep in his chest, his ears forward, his fur rising like a storm of its own. I put a hand on his neck, steadying him, and checked the clock. 12:07 a.m. No one comes calling at this hour unless something's on fire. But when I flipped on the porch light and peered through the peephole, what I saw wasn't an emergency. It was an entitlement complex in a parka. Karen Dunkirk, president of the Black Pine Estates HOA. She stood there on my porch like she owned the mountain, her face pinched, her eyes narrowed. I'd seen her glare before at community meetings in town, but tonight, it had a different edge. I unlocked the deadbolt, but kept the chain on. Opened the door a few inches, letting the freezing wind snake inside. Grank shoved his nose into the gap, growling louder. "Winters!" she snapped, her voice sharp as broken glass. "No greeting, no explanation. Just my name like it was a crime. You need to open your home. It's my weekend up here, Kevin. I already promised my cousins my weekend slot. Their rental fell through. Your cabin will do." I stared at her, wondering if the cold had scrambled my hearing. Maybe I'd eaten some bad jerky. Surely she hadn't. Just said that. "I'm sorry," I said flatly. "I think the altitude's getting to you. What did you just say?" Her breath plumed white in the air as she huffed. "Don't play dumb with me. There's a state of emergency. The roads are closing. My cousins are stranded. They have nowhere to go." She gestured behind her. Sure enough, a minivan idled at the edge of my driveway, its headlights cutting through the flurries. "So," I said slowly, "that sounds like a problem. For them." Grank barked, sharp and booming. Karen's eyes flashed. "This is a community. Kevin, we help each other. I've declared all available properties to be used for emergency shelter." I almost laughed. "Almost. Karen," I said, keeping my voice steady, "we've been over this. I'm not in your community, my property. Line ends 100 yards before your kingdom even begins. You have no jurisdiction here. None." Her face flushed red. She stepped closer. "This is not a time for legal nonsense. It's about decency, about humanitarian kindness. They have a child with them." I glanced past her at the van but saw no child in the dark. It didn't matter. My grandfather built this cabin with his own hands. He taught me to be self-reliant, to be prepared, and above all, to never let a bully push me off my own land. This place wasn't just timber and stone. It was memory. Legacy. "My answer is no," I said, quiet but firm. "There's a hotel in town. The county has a shelter at the high school. They're not staying here. This is my house, not a public inn." Karen's face twisted into fury. She pointed a gloved finger at me, shaking with rage. "You are a selfish, antisocial man, Kevin Winters, and that dog of yours is a menace." "He's a great judge of character," I shot back, her eyes narrowed to slits. "You will regret this," she hissed. "When this storm is over, you'll learn what it means to be part of a community. One way or another." She spun, boots crunching against the frozen ground, and stomped back to her car. The taillights vanished into the swirling snow, but her words lingered in the air, colder than the wind itself. Inside, I shut the door, slipped the chain off, relocked it. Grank whined, uneasy. I scratched his ears. "I know, buddy. She's something else." But as I looked out into the night, The storm hammering harder now, I knew the truth. People like Karen don't just walk away. They escalate. And with her threat echoing in my ears, I realized something chilling. The real blizzard hadn't even started yet. The storm outside was building, but the storm coming for me had already started. Minutes after Karen's taillights vanished into the dark, I noticed something. The minivan hadn't left. Its brake lights glowed faintly at the curve where my driveway met the county road. Two angry red eyes staring back through the snow. Grank's hackles lifted. He pressed his nose to the window and gave a low growl. I stepped onto the porch, sweeping the floodlight across the swirling white. The beam landed on a hooded figure standing by my mailbox. They flinched, nearly slipping on the ice, but steadied themselves. Their voice cracked in the wind. She said, "This is the community shelter now. You were lied to." I narrowed my eyes. Private road, private house. If you feel like testifying later, film from the county shoulder. The figure shifted nervously. Then they pulled something from under their coat, a laminated sign. Big blue letters, emergency shelter, Black Pine Estates. They moved toward my mailbox, a zip tie in hand, like they had every right to brand my cabin theirs. Don't. The word came out low, steady, carrying more weight than the storm. Even Grank froze at the tone. My husky let out a rumbling growl that filled the silence between the gusts. The figure hesitated, eyes darting from me to the dog. "Sorry, man. Look, I don't want trouble." "Then don't make any." Back in the van. Tell her my no doesn't melt. They backed away fast, breath fogging. The sign disappeared under their coat, and the van crept down the road until the taillights were swallowed by the storm. I thought that was the end of it. But when I checked the post minutes later, I found another laminated copy taped to the far side, hidden. Slick move. I ripped it down, folded it, and tossed it into the stove. The paper curled, blackened, and vanished into flames. The cabin crackled back into silence, but my gut told me I'd just burned the first shot in a war. At dawn, the world outside my window was a swirling chaos of white and gray. The blizzard had arrived in full. I poured coffee, the smell rich and grounding, but as I sat down, my laptop chimed. An email. Sent at 3:15 a.m. from Karen Dunkirk, president of Black Pine Estates. The subject line hit like a fist. Community. Safety alert. Uncooperative neighbor on Black Pine Ridge. I opened it. Her words dripped with poison, dressed up in concern. She painted me as a paranoid recluse, dangerous, unstable. She claimed I'd refused humanitarian aid during a declared emergency. She even called Grank an uncontrolled animal, a menace. It was a masterpiece of smear tactics, written like she was saving the world from a villain. My hands tightened on the mug until it creaked. She wasn't just harassing me, she was declaring me guilty in front of my whole community. And then came the rumble. Faint at first, a grinding sound growing, louder through the blizzard. I stepped to the window, heart sinking. 3 SUVs crawled up my driveway in a convoy, snow tires chewing through the drifts. The lead car? Karen's, I muttered under my breath. Of course. The convoy couldn't reach the last 50 yards. The snow was too deep. So they parked in a line, blocking the only way in or out. Doors opened and out stepped Karen with her so-called Safety and Aesthetics Committee. 4 figures bundled in designer parkas, faces stern with self-importance. Karen clutched a clipboard like it was a badge of authority. I pulled on my boots, zipped my red parka, and stepped onto the porch. Grank padded out beside me, his growl already rising. "Morning, Karen," I said calmly. "Decided to take a winter hike?" She ignored the sarcasm. "Kevin, this is an official HOA inspection," she announced, voice carrying over the wind. "We've received numerous complaints regarding potential safety violations on your property. We must inspect for compliance with community standards." I leaned against the railing, arms crossed. "Karen, let me say this slowly. My property is not in your HOA." I pulled a folded map from my pocket. County plat records, highlighted in yellow and red. Legal boundaries clear as day. I held it up. This says you have no authority here. None. So you can turn your vehicles around and go inspect your own mailboxes." Her face tightened, but she didn't retreat. Instead, she climbed one step like she was mounting a stage. Clipboard raised. "I am serving notice of inspection for life safety violations. Failure to comply will result in fines." "No," I said flatly. She reached out, trying to tape a sleeve of papers to my post. That's when Grank slid one paw forward, teeth flashing. The big man with her muttered nervously, "Just let us look around, Winters. 5 minutes, we'll be out of your hair." He put one boot on the step. "That's your second trespass," I warned. "Don't make me count to 3. A gust of wind ripped the clipboard from Karen's hand. Papers scattered across the snow like white leaves. The big man lunged after them, slipping. He would have face-planted down the steps, but I caught his sleeve, hauling him back to balance. "You're welcome," I muttered. "Now get off my steps." Karen's lips pressed into a bloodless line. "You assaulted him," she hissed. "You watch me keep him from eating the stairs," I shot back. "There's a difference." Her voice turned sharp. "Launch the drone, get roof shots, ice load, anything we can sight." I stepped forward. "You launch anything over my land and it's coming down in a hefty bag." For a long moment, it was a standoff. 4 of them. 1 of me, and a very large, very unhappy husky growling low beside me. Finally, Karen broke. "This isn't over," she muttered. She gathered her group, stomping back to the SUVs. Engines growled. They executed a clumsy 3-point turn and headed back down the mountain. I stood in the blowing snow, my chest heaving. She wasn't giving up. She was regrouping, testing, escalating. My grandfather always told me, never give a bully an inch. Kevin, because they'll take a mile. And as I bolted the door behind me and watched the storm swallow their tire tracks, I knew one thing for sure. She wasn't coming for a mile. She was coming for it all. Most people think storms are only about snow and wind, but the real storm that night wasn't outside my cabin. It was the one Karen had unleashed from her living room, her phone in hand, spinning lies into emergencies. By mid-morning, the blizzard was pounding the ridge with everything it had. Snow hammered sideways, turning the world into a churning mess of white. Inside, the cabin was warm, coffee steaming, wood stove glowing. Grank paced, restless, nose twitching. He could feel it too. The storm outside wasn't the only one bearing down. The first sign was the voice on my CB radio. A channel I usually kept silent for emergencies crackled alive. "Estates patrol to Ridge House. Clear the lane for emergency equipment. Repeat. Clear the lane." I froze. Estates patrol? That wasn't law enforcement. It was Karen's invention, a bunch of cronies with laminated badges and too much free time. "You're on a public channel," I said, voice steady. "Identify yourself and your agency." Silence. Then another voice, muffled, strained, almost theatrical. "Community safety team. Need ingress for welfare check. Failure to comply will be noted." I clicked the record button. "Records running. State your badge number. Nothing but static." Then the carrier dropped so fast it squealed. I set the handset down and looked at Grank. He growled low like he already knew the truth. "We're not alone, buddy," I whispered, but we knew that already. I walked the perimeter, checking what I'd rigged. Old pie tins on wires strung low across the drive, nails rattling inside them. Grandpa's old clatter lines. Not much, but enough to rattle nerves and alert me if someone crept too close in the dark. That's when I found it. Tracks in the snow near the propane tank, half buried under fresh drifts. Not boots, not tires, a hand-pulled sled. Someone had dragged it across my side yard, stopped close enough to read the gauge on the propane, maybe close enough to close a valve if they wanted me freezing by morning. I clenched my jaw, tearing a piece of orange survey tape from a branch nearby. A marker. Someone had planned to come back. But before I could process that, headlights appeared through the storm, red and blue flashing against the trees. The sheriff. I stepped onto the porch, tightening my parka. A single SUV crawled up the drive, snow spitting from its tires. Out stepped 2 deputies, One older, mustached, weary eyes. His tag read Alvarez. The other was younger, stiff-backed, his hand never straying far from his holster. More. They trudged up through the snow. Alvarez gave me a calm nod. Kevin Winters? That's me. Something we need to talk about. Deputy Moore spoke, before his partner could. His tone was sharp, accusatory. Sir, we've received multiple complaints from the HOA president, a Mrs. Karen Dunkirk. She alleges you're creating a public nuisance, harboring a dangerous animal and making threats. I bit the inside of my cheek, keeping my voice even. She's lying. She's angry because I wouldn't let her use my cabin as a free hotel. My dog is on my property. The only threats made were by her, against me. Moore scribbled in his notepad. Miss Dunkirk also reports unpermitted structures, violations of community covenants. I cut him off. Hold on. Let's be clear. Sergeant Deputy, you are standing on private land that has never been part of Black Pine Estates. My deed is clear. The county plat map is clear. The HOA ends 100 yards down the road. I stepped inside briefly, returning with papers. In hand. The plat map, my deed, the county tax receipts. I handed them to Alvarez. His gloves creaked as he studied them. He glanced at the map, then down the drive toward the valley. Slowly, he nodded. Looks like you're right, Mr. Winters. This parcel's outside the HOA boundary. Moore frowned. With all due respect, Sergeant, she claims there's a verbal agreement. There is no agreement, I interrupted, heat rising in my chest. There's only a woman who's used to getting her way, now abusing 911 because I said no. You're the third group she sent to harass me today. The first two were her friends. Alvarez handed back the papers, his eyes meeting mine. Do you have any weapons in the house, Mr. Winters? I took a breath. A hunting rifle, locked in a safe, legal, and a wood axe by the stove. Standard mountain cabin equipment. He nodded again, expression thoughtful. All right. We had to respond to the call, but from what I see, this is a civil matter, a dispute between neighbors. She's not my neighbor, I said quietly. She lives a mile down that road in a different world. Alvarez gave me a weary smile. Fair enough. We'll go. Talk with her again. Stay warm. It's going to get rough. They turned back toward their SUV, trudging through the snow. Moore shot me a suspicious look over his shoulder, like he was convinced I was hiding something. Alvarez, though, looked like he saw it for what it was, a woman weaponizing authority. But as their taillights disappeared, I caught something else. At the bottom of my property line, tucked into the trees, a dark sedan idled. It pulled away the moment the sheriff's SUV vanished. Karen's people. Watching. Waiting. I clenched my fists, a cold resolve settling in my chest. This wasn't about a blizzard anymore. It wasn't about cousins needing shelter. This was siege. And if Karen was going to treat my home like a castle to be taken, then I was going to defend it like one. That night, while the storm screamed and the cabin shuddered, I pulled down my old footlocker. Gear from my days as a wildland fire volunteer. Motion-activated trail cameras, weatherproof, night vision, still good batteries. By lantern light, I worked through the storm, fingers numb, breath steaming in the cold. One camera aimed at the porch, another covering the back door, a third hidden in the aspens, watching the driveway, all fed wirelessly to my tablet inside, my eyes, my proof. Then came the paper war. Karen had her smear emails, her false reports. I had deeds, surveys, tax records. I scanned them all into a folder labeled proof. If she wanted a war of words, I was ready. And last, I strung one more of Grandpa's tricks. A silent alarm. One of Grank's old collars with brass bells, tied to fishing line. The line ran low to the ground, ankle height, across the path to my back porch. If anyone tried sneaking up, even the slightest touch would make those bells sing inside my cabin. By the time I was done, the storm was raging. But inside, the cabin was a fortress. The cameras were my eyes, the papers my shield, the dog my guard, and me, my grandfather's grandson. Grank lay by the front door, head on his paws, ears forward, his body like a loaded spring. I sat by, the stove, tablet glowing beside me, 3 feeds of snowblind images flickering. The trap was set, and sometime before dawn, it tripped. The bells gave a soft tick, like a spoon tapping china. Grank's head shot up. His growl rolled through the silence. I grabbed my headlamp, heart pounding, and eased open the back door. The storm pressed its icy breath against me, and through the swirling white, I saw them, 2 shadowy figures moving in the dark. The silence of a blizzard is strange. The snow swallows sound, wrapping the world in a muffled hush so deep that even your own heartbeat feels too loud. But inside that quiet, you hear everything. The creak of the cabin settling, the hiss of logs burning in the stove, the soft sigh of a dog asleep at your feet. It was that silence that shattered at 4:12 a.m. I wasn't asleep. Sleep was impossible with the storm raging. I was dozing in the armchair, Grank curled at the door like a furry sentinel, his nose pointed at the dark. Then, all at once, he stiffened. His head lifted, ears sharp. A low growl started deep in his chest. His eyes locked on the back of the house. And then I heard it, the faint metallic jingle of brass bells, the trip line. My heart leapt. I snatched the tablet from the side table, thumb swiping the screen alive. The trail cams blinked into focus. Whiteout snow on 2 feeds, swirling and empty. Then the back camera flickered, and my stomach dropped. 2 figures, both dressed head to toe in dark hoodies, their faces hidden by shadows and the storm. One stood watch, eyes scanning the tree line nervously. The other crouched low by the kitchen window, the very window where I'd drilled the tiny hole for the fishing line. In his hand was something small, metallic. A pry bar. I hit record. The red dot blinked in the corner of the feed. Every second now, captured forever. The crouched figure jammed the pry bar into the frame. The old wood groaned under the pressure. My blood turned to fire. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was a crime in progress. I grabbed my cell phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. When the dispatcher answered, I forced my voice low and steady, though my heart hammered in my chest. This is Kevin Winters. I need to report a breaking and entering in progress. 2 individuals. Male, I think. One's attempting to pry open my back window right now. Address is 14 Black Pine Ridge. They are on camera. Live feed recording. The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional. Are you in a safe location, sir? Yes, I whispered, eyes glued to the tablet. But they're about to get in. The figure at the window put his weight into the bar. The glass shuddered. My breath caught. Suddenly, the lookout tensed. He'd heard something, the faint murmur of my voice, maybe. He grabbed his partner's shoulder. They froze. Both stared toward the cabin. A long, terrible moment. And then panic. The pry bar clattered into the snow. Both figures turned and bolted, scrambling into the woods like shadows fleeing dawn. But not before fate slipped. The crouched figure stumbled. His hood fell back for just a second. He looked up toward the camera. The infrared flash snapped a perfect crystal-clear image of his face. I knew him, Karen's nephew. The kid she always had mowing her lawn and doing grunt work at HOA events. The same nephew she claimed needed shelter. The dispatcher's voice broke through the static of my fury. Sir, are you still there? The suspects have fled? Yes, I breathed. Relief and rage twisted together. They ran into the woods, but I have them on video. One of them is identifiable. She promised a car would be dispatched, but the roads were treacherous. It might be hours. I understood. I ended the call, saved the video file, and labeled it Attempted B&E, 4:12 a.m. I had them. Undeniable proof. For a moment, adrenaline burned hot in my veins. I paced, clenching and unclenching my fists. Karen had sent her own blood to break into my home. When she realized they'd failed, and worse, that I had their faces on camera, what would she do next? A cornered animal is dangerous. A cornered tyrant? Even worse. The blizzard intensified, snow hammering the windows until the world outside vanished completely. Law enforcement wouldn't reach me. I was on my own. I stoked the fire, fed Grank, and tried to calm my racing thoughts. But the quiet was worse than the storm. The silence meant she was thinking. Plotting. The phone rang at noon. Caller ID, Sheriff's Department. I snatched it up. This is Winters. Mr. Winters, this is Sergeant Alvarez. His voice was steady but tired. We received your report about the attempted break-in. We'll need a formal statement when roads open, but that's not why I'm calling. I gripped the phone tighter. What now? He hesitated. I could hear the frustration in his sigh. Karen Dunkirk has filed another report. She claims she saw smoke from your chimney stop earlier. She says your heat has failed. She's concerned you'll freeze. I barked a bitter laugh. The stove was blazing hot, my cabin warm as summer. She's lying again. The fire's been going all night. I figured as much, Alvarez said grimly. But she's gone further. She's now claiming, you have a child in the house. The blood drained from my face. A what? She says a young nephew is staying with you. That he's at risk due to your unstable behavior and lack of heat. She's demanding an emergency welfare check under child endangerment statutes. For a moment, I was speechless. Then fury surged like fire. There is no child here, Sergeant. It's just me and my dog. She fabricated a child. She's creating a lie to force her way in. I believe you, Alvarez said. And to my surprise, he sounded like he meant it. Her story's changed 3 times in 12 hours. It stinks. But my hands are tied. A child at risk. We have to respond. She's already arranged for a plow truck to clear the road for us. My deputies are en route. I looked out at the storm, snow still slamming sideways. My gut twisted. She was plowing the road for the very people she'd manipulated, all to get to me. She created the emergency, and now she's providing the solution. I muttered. Yes, Alvarez said darkly. It's brilliant in a sick way. Just be ready, Mr. Winters. They're coming. He hung up. I stood there, staring out at the white void. My cabin felt smaller suddenly, the walls closer. Karen wasn't cornered anymore. She was mounting a raid. She was bringing the law itself to my doorstep, armed with lies about a phantom child. And I realized something in that moment, with my heart pounding, the storm rattling the windows, and Grank growling low at the door. This was no longer about saying no to an entitled HOA president. This was about survival, of my home, my name, and the truth. Sometimes the only way to fight a lie is to drag it into the light. My grandfather used to say, "Sunlight is the best disinfectant." That phrase echoed in my head as I stood in my cabin, the phone call from Sergeant Alvarez still buzzing in my ears. Karen had escalated again, and this time she wasn't just twisting facts. She had invented a phantom child. I couldn't wait for the deputies to arrive and let her spin her web on my porch. If she controlled the story, I'd be the villain, before the truth ever saw daylight. I had to get ahead of her. I dragged my laptop to the big picture window, the one that looked out over the porch and driveway. I set up a live stream. My hands shook a little as I typed the title, Illegal HOA Harassment and False Police Report in Progress. The camera blinked red. Live. I shared the link to my social media, but more importantly, I messaged Josh, my neighbor on the next ridge, and one of the few sane voices down in the valley. He was part of a community watch group online. Josh, I wrote, going live. Karen's bringing the cops on a fake child welfare call. Spread this. Then I went to work. I pulled up the official county assessor's map, circled my property in bright red, circled the HOA boundary 100 yards away. My voice was steady as I spoke into the laptop mic, narrating for whoever was watching. My name is Kevin Winters. This is my property. As you can see from this county map, I am not part of any HOA. Despite this, the president of Black Pine Estates has been harassing me, filing false reports. Early this morning, her family attempted to break into my home. I have video evidence. I opened the 412 footage. The 2 hooded figures appeared on screen, one prying at the window. I froze the frame at the exact moment the nephew's face was revealed. This man is her nephew, I said, my tone cold. And this is proof of attempted burglary. She is now claiming I have a child in this house to justify a welfare check. There is no child. This is a lie. The viewer count ticked upward. 10, 50, then over 100. Josh was spreading the link. People were watching, and that's when I heard it. The grinding roar of a snowplow. Headlights cut through the whiteout. A massive truck with a plow pushed into my driveway, steel scraping against packed ice. Behind it, just as Alvarez had warned, crawled a sheriff's SUV, and behind that, Karen's own car, lights flashing as though she were leading the parade. I whispered to Grank, "Here we go, buddy." The plow crossed onto my property, and the motion sensor siren I'd rigged screamed to life. A piercing, shrill alarm designed to scare off bears ripped through the storm. Deputies flinched. The plow screeched to a halt. I opened the door and stepped onto the porch, arms folded, Grank beside me, barking furiously, his deep voice rolling like thunder. Karen threw her door open. She was out in seconds, her pink robe flapping, hair curlers bobbing, her face twisted in outrage. She stormed forward, gesturing wildly, shouting over the alarm. I couldn't make out the words, but her theatrics were plain. She pointed at me, at the cabin, at the chimney. Then she jabbed a finger toward the porch, her voice shrill even against the storm. The deputies arrived between us. Alvarez lifted his hand, commanding, "Mrs. Dunkirk, stay back. This is a knock and talk. No warrant, no entry. Let us handle this." But Karen ignored him, shrieking louder. "He's unstable. He has my nephew's boy in there. He refused me my weekend booking. He's endangering a child." It was a performance, a stage play. She had even brought props. Her nephew and another man unloading blankets, boxes of supplies from her SUV, staging them like humanitarian aid, for the deputies to see. But she didn't know hundreds of people were already watching her performance unravel online. The viewer count surged past 300. Then it happened. The nephew, the same one from the break-in video, made his move. While Alvarez tried to calm Karen, the kid darted past him, shouting something about saving a child. He sprinted toward my porch, fumbling in his pocket. I froze. In his hand was a bump key. I recognized it instantly from videos online. Locksmith tool, burglar's favorite trick. He jammed it into my lock, in full view of 2 deputies. Police. "Get your hands off the door," Deputy Moore barked, his voice cracking through the chaos. The nephew froze. Moore lunged, twisting his arm behind his back, slamming him against the log wall of my cabin. The bump key clattered into the snow. Handcuffs snapped shut with a sound sharp enough to cut through even the storm. The alarm timed out. The sudden silence was deafening. Karen's shriek split it. "What are you doing? He was just trying to help. That's my nephew." Alvarez turned to her, his face like carved stone. "Your nephew, ma'am, was just caught on a live stream attempting unlawful entry, in front of an officer." Her face drained white. She looked from the cuffs on her nephew's wrists to the glowing phone propped in my window, the green light of the live stream blinking. She realized in one single awful second that her empire of lies was collapsing live. For everyone to see, her voice cracked into a wail. "It's a misunderstanding. He thought he heard the boy crying. He wasn't thinking clearly." But no one was listening. The truth was louder now. The live stream had it all. And when Alvarez pulled the nephew's phone from his pocket for evidence, the final nail in her coffin was waiting. The screen lit up, and text messages began popping up, one after another, like dominoes falling. The glow of a phone screen shouldn't change the world, but that afternoon on Black Pine Ridge, it did. Sergeant Alvarez held the nephew's phone in his gloved hand, ready to bag it as evidence. But before he could lock it away, the screen lit up. New messages buzzed one after another, each notification stacking like bullets in a chamber. And then we all saw the name of the group chat at the top. Dunkirk Winter Stays. The administrator? Karen Dunkirk. Alvarez froze. His tired eyes narrowed as the first message popped across the lock screen. "Aunt Kay, is the Ridge House open yet? The Millers will pay $500 for 2 nights. A second followed. "Tell Mark the key is under the fake rock by the woodpile. Owner is out of state." And then another, time-stamped just 20 minutes earlier, from the very nephew now cuffed against my cabin wall, stuck on the porch. "Old guy called the cops. Stick to the story about the kid. The silence that followed wasn't the storm's doing. It was the silence of truth detonating in the middle of a lie. Alvarez turned the screen so Deputy Moore could see. His jaw tightened as he read, his stiff by-the-book posture stiffening even further. Moore had been suspicious of me since he arrived. He'd believed Karen's safety act. But staring at those texts, watching the messages keep rolling in, his expression cracked into something colder. Disgust. Karen's voice faltered. It's not what it looks like, she stammered, her face pale as snow. I was just helping people find a place during the storm. It's a service. Her excuses sounded pathetic against the neon glow of her own words. Alvarez's face hardened. He swiped the screen upward, scrolling through the history of the chat. His jaw clenched tighter with every message. There were lists of addresses, other cabins, other names. My property was near the top, marked in bold, uncooperative, needs persuasion. There were instructions, how to jimmy windows, how to stage nuisance complaints, what to say if law enforcement arrived, even price lists. 2-bedroom, no owner. Present $400 per night. Occupied property, emergency duress claim, $600 hazard pay. Karen hadn't been trying to help her cousins. She'd been running an underground rental racket. A black market hotel scam, using the storm as cover and the HOA as her weapon. My stomach turned. She wasn't just bullying me. She'd been targeting everyone, turning homes into her personal gold mine. Deputy Moore's face flushed red as he scrolled. He'd been her pawn, the one citing covenants and community standards. Now he realized he'd been enforcing a criminal scheme. Karen saw the shift. She panicked. "No, this is all out of context," she cried, stepping forward, her voice shrill. "Those were jokes, notes for emergencies. I wasn't profiting, I was protecting." But the live stream was still running. Hundreds, maybe thousands by now, were watching the text glow across the screen. Watching her melt down in real time. Alvarez's voice was iron. "Mrs. Dunkirk, this isn't a misunderstanding. This is conspiracy, burglary, wire fraud, filing false police reports." He glanced at Moore. "Cuff her." The words hit harder. Then the blizzard winds. Moore moved fast, his earlier hesitation gone. He stepped past the cuffed nephew and grabbed Karen's wrist before she could back away. Her scream ripped through the storm, high and shrill, echoing off the pines. "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president. I'm protecting the community." Her protest sounded hollow now. Moore snapped the cuffs around her wrists with a final, metallic click. Grank barked once, sharp and booming, as if punctuating the moment. For the first time, Karen looked small, powerless, not a queen on her throne, but a petty thief caught in the act. Alvarez held the phone higher, letting the live stream camera see the chat clearly. "This is evidence of a criminal enterprise. Broadcast live, no room for spin, no room for lies." Karen's knees wobbled. "Please. I was just trying to help." But her nephew groaned from where he slumped against the wall, the cuffs biting his wrists. "You dragged me into this." He spat, bitter. "This was your idea. I told you it was stupid." The betrayal cut sharper than the storm. Her own family, cracking under pressure. The deputies marched them both toward the SUVs. Karen's pink robe flapped wildly, curlers dangling, her voice breaking into sobs and shrieks that no one believed anymore. The neighbors watching the live stream weren't seeing a leader. They were seeing what she really was. A manipulator. A liar. A criminal. I stood on the porch, the cold biting through my coat, my heart pounding. For hours, for days, she had tried to strip me of dignity, of peace, of my very right to live in my own home. And now, in the simplest of ways, she had undone herself, with her own words glowing on a phone screen. When Alvarez walked back, he paused at the bottom of my steps. He met my eyes. For the first time since he'd arrived, there was no doubt in his voice. "You did good holding the line, Mr. Winters. This kind of truth doesn't come easy, but it came tonight." He turned, climbing into the SUV. The red and blue lights pulsed across the snow, fading as the vehicles wound down the mountain road. Karen's screams echoed faintly before the blizzard swallowed them whole. And then, silence again. But it was a different silence this time. Not the silence of fear. The silence of a storm ending. Inside, I collapsed into the armchair, Grank pressing his weight against my legs. My hands still shook, but not from fear anymore. It was release. The live stream was still rolling. I leaned forward, speaking quietly. Into the mic, not for drama, not for spectacle, but because it was the truth. You all saw it. I didn't have to fight her with fists or fire. Just with proof, just with patience. That's how you hold the line. And as the chat messages flooded in, neighbors horrified, strangers offering support, I realized something. Karen hadn't just lost her power. She'd burned her kingdom to the ground, and Black Pine Ridge would never be the same again. By the time the sheriff's SUVs wound their way down the mountain, red and blue lights swallowed by the storm, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same on Black Pine Ridge. The live stream stayed rolling long after Karen's. Screams faded into the whiteout. Comments poured in faster than I could read. Neighbors, strangers, people from towns down the valley, all horrified, all stunned. Many admitted they'd suspected her community emergency stunts were too convenient, too theatrical. But now, with the proof glowing on that phone screen, no one could deny it anymore. I shut the laptop at last. The cabin went quiet again. Only the pop of the fire and the steady rhythm of Grank's breathing filled the air. My dog leaned against me, warm and solid, as if reminding me that I hadn't imagined any of it. Still, my hands shook. Not with fear this time, but with the aftershock of knowing the siege was finally broken. The storm carried on outside, but it felt different. It wasn't pressing down on me anymore. It was cleansing, wiping the mountain clean. The following days blurred together in a haze of white and silence. Roads remained closed. I split wood, stoked the stove, shoveled snow when I could. Grank, and I stayed close, waiting for the storm to ease. When it finally broke, the valley below was buzzing. News spread fast in a small county, faster than wildfire on dry brush. By the time deputies booked Karen Dunkirk, half the town knew her as the Blizzard Baroness, the HOA tyrant who turned a state of emergency into her own rental scam. The charges stacked tall: conspiracy, burglary, false reports, wire fraud. Her mugshot landed on the front page of the county paper, curlers still in her hair, her eyes wide with disbelief. The woman who had once strutted through town with a clipboard and a sneer now looked like a ghost of herself. The HOA board tried to hold a meeting to control the damage, but their own members turned on them. Too many had been dragged into Karen's safety committees, used as pawns for her games. Too many had watched the live stream, seen her lies unravel in real time. At that meeting, one I'd never attended before, one I'd always declined with a polite no thanks, the residents voted not to censure her, not to replace her, but to dissolve the board completely. Black Pine Estates HOA, the little kingdom that had tormented homeowners for years with endless fines, threats, and power trips, collapsed in one afternoon. The bylaws were torn up. The authority she had worshipped was stripped down to nothing. Neighbors who had once whispered about Karen in fear now spoke openly, angrily. Some apologized to me for believing her stories. Others admitted she'd threatened them too, hinting at fines or citations if they didn't fall in line. And when the smoke cleared, they offered something I hadn't expected: a formal apology. They invited me to the emergency meeting in the community hall, not as a defendant, not as a target, but as the man who had exposed the truth. When I walked in, people fell silent. Dozens of faces turned toward me, faces that had once looked at me with suspicion, now filled with something else: shame, respect, relief. One man stood. His voice was rough but steady. "Mr. Winters, on behalf of this community, we're sorry for the lies, for the harassment, for what she did in our name. We let it go too far, and we're sorry." I nodded once. Words felt unnecessary. I didn't need their apology, but I understood the weight of it. They weren't just apologizing to me, they were reclaiming their own dignity. The vote was unanimous. The HOA was dissolved. A new community charter would be written from scratch, stripped of the kind of power Karen had abused. For the first time in years, Black Pine Ridge would be free of her shadow. Back at the cabin, life settled again. Snow melted, paths cleared. The woods grew quiet with the kind of silence my grandfather loved, the silence of peace, not of fear. Grank sprawled by the stove, paws twitching as he dreamed. I stirred a pot of chili, the scent filling the log walls my grandfather had cut, and notched himself. For days, this place had been a battlefield, a fortress under siege. But now it was once again what he had built it to be, a refuge. Sometimes in the evenings, I sat on the porch and just breathed the cold mountain air, looked out over the valley where the HOA had once reigned, its influence crumbled into dust. Thought about Karen, about how far she had gone just to cling to power, about the lengths people will take when they believe they're untouchable, and about how, in the end, it wasn't rage or force that brought her down. It was her own words, her own arrogance, her refusal to hear the word no. I didn't need to fight her with fists. I didn't need to match her lies with lies. I just needed to hold the line. And when the truth came, it came like sunlight through the storm. Blinding, undeniable, impossible to ignore. The mountain was quiet again, and, for the first time in a long time, so was I. Everyone thought the storm had ended when the snowplows cleared the last drifts off the ridge road. But the real storm, the one Karen had unleashed with her lies, her power games, her endless hunger for control, didn't fade as quickly as the snow. It lingered, even after her arrest. Even after the HOA's collapse. Even after the neighbors' apologies, because storms don't just bury roads. They bury trust. For weeks, I still felt the weight of her shadow in the cabin. Every creak of the logs, every rattle of the window pane. In the night made me wonder if someone was out there, waiting. Every phone call with a blocked number made my stomach tighten, like I'd hear her voice on the other end, shrill and desperate. But slowly, something shifted. I began to realize the silence around me wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was the silence of freedom. I woke each morning to the sound of Grank stretching by the stove, his paws tapping against the wood floor. I'd brew coffee, step outside, and breathe in the cold, sharp mountain air. And for the first time in months, no one was watching me. No one was circling my property line, waving citations, or recording false complaints. No one was waiting with a clipboard, pretending their title gave them dominion over my life. The land was mine again. I took long walks down to the frozen creek where my grandfather used to fish. I remembered the summers when I was just a boy, following him through these woods, watching the way he moved, careful and quiet, always respectful of the mountain. Out here, he'd say, you don't own the land. You take care of it, and if you take care of it, it'll take care of you. Karen had never understood that. To her, the mountain was something to exploit, to rent, to flip for profit, to bend to her will. She thought power came from paperwork and titles and the sound of her own voice. But my grandfather had it right. Real. Power is quieter. It's the kind that doesn't need to be shouted. It's the kind that endures, storm after storm, lie after lie. When spring came, the snow melted back into the earth, and the mountain seemed to breathe again. The stream swelled, the first wildflowers pushed through the thaw, and the cabin stood solid, scarred by the winter but unbroken. So was I. News trickled in from the valley. Karen's court dates stretched on. Her nephew cut a deal, trading testimony for leniency. The board members scattered, some retreating into silence, others trying to reinvent themselves as innocent bystanders. But no one believed them anymore. The community was different now. People spoke up. They checked facts before believing rumors. They stopped letting a single person's voice drown out their own. Sometimes I'd see cars pull up at the bottom of the ridge. Neighbors would step out, just to stand in the snow and look up toward the cabin. They didn't climb the drive. They didn't intrude. They just stood there, like they were reminding themselves that it was still here, that I was still here. that some things couldn't be bullied out of existence, and in their quiet way, I think they were thanking me. Not with words, but with presence. I never asked for that role. Never wanted to be the man who stood against the HOA queen. I just wanted peace. I just wanted to live in the cabin my grandfather built, tend the land, and keep the fire burning through the long winters. But sometimes life doesn't give you the luxury of staying invisible. Sometimes the storm comes to your door whether you invite it or not. And when it does, you find out who you really are. I wasn't a fighter by nature. I wasn't looking for a war. But I had something Karen could never take. Patience. Proof. And the willingness to hold the line until the truth came through. Looking back now, I realized something I didn't understand at the time. The storm wasn't just trying to bury me. It was uncovering her, exposing what had always been there, hidden under charm and authority. She thought she had built a fortress out of fear. But fear is fragile. It cracks the moment truth pushes against it. Sometimes dignity doesn't look like raising your voice. Sometimes it looks like refusing to bow your head. The cabin stands quiet now. At night, when the wind sweeps down from the ridge, I sit on the porch with Grank at my feet and watch the stars cut sharp across the sky. And I think about everything that's happened. Karen thought she could take my home. She thought she could bend the law, twist the truth, even invent a child to force me to yield. But she never understood the simple fact my grandfather taught me when I was small. Home isn't something you're given. Home is something you build, something you defend, something you love enough to stand for, no matter who tries to take it. The mountain remembers, and so do I. So when people ask me what happened up here during the blizzard, why a powerful HOA? President ended up in handcuffs while a cabin still stood strong on the ridge. I tell them the truth in the only way that matters. I didn't defeat her. She defeated herself. All I did was hold the line.